In 2014, Laverne Cox said that misgendering trans people is an act of violence.
Well, that's retarded.
Since then, she has repeated this statement multiple times, but some people still don't want to believe it.
Yeah, because they're not retarded.
So I thought I'd explain why intentionally misgendering trans people is an act of violence and why you shouldn't do it.
Oh, goody! Please explain why I should not be able to use and express my freedom of speech.
To get started, we need some definitions. Misgendering is the act of referring to someone by the wrong gender or implying that they are a gender that they are not. So if you call a boy she or refer to him as a girl, that's misgendering. You can misgender cis people or trans people, but it's particularly dehumanizing when done to trans people, and it's something that basically all trans people have to deal with at some point. Of course, there are times when people intentionally misgender feminine cis boys or masculine cis girls as a way of trying to reinforce arbitrary gender roles. And that's awful as well, but I'm mainly going to be discussing misgendering towards trans people in this video.
Yeah, cause screw cis scum. Die all cis scum. Die all cis scum. Die all cis scum. Die all... What? Wait, what do you mean that's sexist? No, it can't. They're cis. They have cis privilege. They can't be oppressed. What? That's not... But they're cis. They're basically not even human. Die. Die all cis scum, right? Right? No? But Okay. For those of you who do not know what cis means, it is a new, trendy, libtard term that basically describes someone who identifies their gender as their biological sex and who is sexually straight. So a man who identifies as a man and is attracted to women, or a woman who identifies as a woman and is attracted to men.
Violence is a harder thing to define.
No, it really isn't that hard to define violence. Turns out you can just Google it. Google defines violence as behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something, which is actually the same definition as the Oxford Dictionary. Oxford also lists the definition by law, which is the unlawful exercise of physical force or intimidation by the exhibition of such force. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines it as exertion of physical force so as to injure or abuse, an instant of violent treatment or procedure, or injury by or as if by distortion, infringement, or profanation. And then dictionary.com defines it as rough or injurious physical force, action, or treatment, or an unjust or unwarranted exertion of force or power as against rights or laws. So it actually turns out that it's not hard to define violence. You just need to do some Googling.
Several dictionaries say that it involves the use of physical force, including the Merriam-Webster and Oxford dictionaries.
Yeah, I just said that. Sheesh. Slow.
However, dictionaries are not intended as all-knowing, unchangeable rulebooks. They change and adapt over time as our usage changes. They are almost always descriptive rather than prescriptive nowadays. I would argue that their definition of violence is outdated and doesn't encompass all of the forms of violence we recognize today. And the World Health Organization agrees with me.
How long did it take you to find a definition that agrees with you? The WHO is not responsible for defining words. The WHO website says, "Our primary role is to direct and coordinate international health within the United Nations system." Compare that to a definition of a dictionary, which is a collection of words in one or more specific languages, often arranged alphabetically, which may include information on definitions, usage, etymologies, phonetics, pronunciations, translations, etc. And you find the flaw in your main argument. The WHO is not responsible for defining words. Oxford, Merriam-Webster, etc., those who make dictionaries and masters and experts in the English language are responsible for defining words. That is their scope and their purpose. The scope and purpose of the WHO is to better public health, and create and improve awareness on disease. That's it. Leave the experts to their expert fields.
In their 2002 World Report on Violence and Health, the WHO defined violence as the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person, or against a group or community that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. This definition is purposefully broad. The WHO recognizes in their report that violence is culturally influenced and varies widely across the globe. What some people see as violence, others may not.
Okay, two things. I love this because you're proving my point. Two things. First, this is one definition by the WHO that you're providing me that you agree with. Meanwhile, I provide you with 4 definitions from 4 different sources. They're all dictionaries. Yes, well, Google's not really a dictionary, but they get their information from dictionaries. And there are multiple other organizations or dictionaries elsewhere that define violence as something physical or an intimidation of another person via a physical force or physical words or actions that threaten violence. So, that's the first point. The second point is there's an issue with the broadness of your definition. The issue I have with it is exactly what you pointed out, is violence is seen different culturally. So if we don't have a specific definition of violence that is accepted worldwide, now it opens up perception. Now think about that. You perceive the world differently than I do. So your perception of violence is different than my perception of violence. But by your definition, you could call me a cis male, and I could say you're being violent to me because I don't identify as a cis male, I identify as a straight man. I don't like that label, and I don't identify by that label. And it offends me, and it is traumatizing to me that you're using that label for me. Do you see how stupid that is? People go around and they perceive the world the way they perceive the world, and trying to thought police and censor people's speech is not the right way. It's not the right way. You're going to have hurt feelings. You're going to have dirtbags in this world. You just need to toughen up. You aren't entitled to have people live their life and speak the way that you want them to so you don't have hurt feelings. That's not how life is. And if you're living in some sort of bubble like that, then I feel bad for you. Because when you get to the real world and people don't give a rat's patootie about your freaking gender pronouns that you identify as, and they don't give a crap, and they call you a him or a he, and your hurt feelings, you think that's violent, well, guess what? There's no laws to defend you in that way. And guess what? There doesn't need to be any laws to defend you in that way because that's censorship.
However, in an effort to fight violence worldwide, this is the definition that the WHO came up with, and it explicitly includes non-physical forms of violence. They say physical force or power, and they note that power isn't necessarily physical. It includes all types of societal power imbalances. Plus, their definition states that violence doesn't have to result in physical injury or death. Instead, it can result in psychological harm. Given that this is the definition that experts on the topic of violence have come up with, I would argue that it's a much better and more effective definition than the one currently listed in most dictionaries.
Yeah, physical force or power. Misgendering or calling you a man because you have dick and balls is not power or physical force. Even by your own definition, what you're saying is not violence. Holy cow, how stupid can one person be?
Therefore, violence does include psychological violence, and misgendering a trans person is absolutely an act of psychological violence.
Still not violence.
If you still, for some reason, have a problem calling it violence, then call it aggression or abuse or whatever you want.
I did. I called it retarded.
The point is, it's a bad thing that we shouldn't do.
No, a bad thing that we shouldn't do is trying to censor people's speech because it hurt my feels.
Ask any trans person and they can tell you how awful being misgendered makes them feel. It's a way of invalidating their identity. It makes them feel disrespected, isolated, uncomfortable, and hated simply because of their gender. It tells them that they should hide who they really are, that people will never fully accept them. Misgendering a trans person causes real psychological harm.
Well, I think I will take your advice and refer to my favorite anti-feminist transgender woman, Blaire White. Take it away, Blaire.
I actually had a job last spring in which one of my coworkers referred to me with the wrong pronouns. She would say he and him, and I'm 99.9% sure it was very much intentional, and she was very much just trying to be a bitch. But here's the thing, like, I got over it.
Very interesting. I don't think that Blaire was psychologically harmed by her coworker not using the right pronouns. I do believe that this does not fit your narrative.
And not only that, but it contributes to physical harm too. Lots of factors contribute to the extraordinarily high rates of suicide among transgender people.
Misgenderment does not have as profound of an impact on the suicide rates that you're trying to make it seem. Obviously, having support from friends and family is helpful and it reduces the percentage some. But it is still a very high percentage. And why is that? It's because of hormonal imbalances. When a real transgender person who is going through hormonal therapy puts these hormones into their body, it affects their brain. The studies I have listed below, well, they're not studies, they're summarizations of different studies that kind of puts it all together, talk about this. And one of them goes over estrogen and says this: evidence now documents profound effects of estrogens on learning, memory, and mood, as well as neurodevelopmental and neurodegenerative processes. However, as investigations are beginning to consider the role of estrogens in male brain more carefully, it emerges that they have different, even opposite effects, as well as similar effects in male and female brains. So estrogens can have opposite effects in male brains, just like testosterone levels have a profound impact on female brains. Women tend to suffer from depression and anxiety at higher levels than men. This because they have lower levels of testosterone. And testosterone, like shown in the study below, has a higher correlation with antidepressant and anti-anxiety. So, when you take a man and you reduce his testosterone levels and pump up his estrogen levels through hormone therapy, yeah, he's going to get depressed. He's going to become sad. He's going to realize that this life that he's chosen is not all kicks and giggles, especially at the start. When you're going through the beginning of the transition, it's going to be hard. And this is a much larger correlation and connection to the high suicide rates in transgenders. It is. Because you cannot deny your biology. It is science. It is fact. And the fact that you're over here saying misgendering people has a profound impact on the suicide rates pisses me off because you have no actual proof. That's it for me today, guys. I hope you liked the video. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. This is The Educationer, and peace. I'm out.